My name is David Harrison. I'm 40 years old, and I've spent 20 years learning that the most effective response to public disrespect is often no response at all, which is why I stood perfectly still near the entrance of the Officers Club ballroom while my wife told 200 people that our marriage was ending. The annual Navy Marine Corps Relief Society Gala was in full swing, dress uniforms and evening gowns filling the marble-floored hall, the kind of event where professional reputations are observed and quietly assessed. I had been standing with a glass of water, half listening to a defense contractor discuss procurement timelines, when I heard Catherine's voice rise above the ambient noise. "I have tried everything," she said, her words carrying with theatrical precision. She stood near the bar, surrounded by a half-circle of other spouses, women whose faces registered shock and second-hand embarrassment. "I have been patient for 5 years, but I will not continue to be married to a man who refuses to acknowledge my son." She wore the black dress she'd bought specifically for tonight, her posture radiating rehearsed indignation. Beside her stood Tyler, my stepson, 26 years old, 2 years unemployed, currently living in our house while he figured things out. He held a champagne flute and wore the expression I'd seen countless times, smug satisfaction mixed with vindication. When he noticed me looking, he raised his glass in a mock toast. "David is never home," Catherine continued, volume increasing. Several nearby conversations stopped. Heads turned. "And when he is home, he treats Tyler like he doesn't exist. I thought marriage would give my son a father figure. Instead, I got a cold, emotionally unavailable man who cares more about his job than his family. More about paperwork than people," Tyler added loudly. Catherine didn't correct him. She nodded as if he'd simply articulated what she'd been too polite to say. A ripple of discomfort moved through the witnesses. I watched her scan the room until her eyes locked on mine across 20 feet of polished marble. "David," she said, projecting now, making certain everyone understood this was confrontation, not gossip. "If you cannot figure out how to be a real husband and a real father to my son, then I am filing for divorce. I mean it. I am done." The ballroom didn't fall silent. Music still played from the far corner. Distant conversations continued. But in our immediate vicinity, perhaps 60 people had gone quiet, their attention shifting between Catherine and me, waiting for my response. Waiting for defense, explanation, apology, anger. I gave them nothing. I looked at Catherine for exactly 3 seconds, my expression neutral, my breathing even and controlled, and then I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, Tyler's voice. "That's right, walk away, it's what you do best." Laughter followed, his certainly, and perhaps 2 or 3 others who found this entertaining. I heard Catherine say something else, her tone shifting to justification or explanation for the women surrounding her. I heard conversations resume, quieter now, the incident already becoming material for gossip that would spread through the community like infection. And I heard my own footsteps measured and even as I walked out of the ballroom without looking back. The valet had my car at the curb within 90 seconds. I tipped him, climbed in and sat behind the wheel for a moment, hands at 10 and 2, staring at nothing in particular. I wasn't angry. Anger is inefficient, a waste of energy better spent on calculation. I was simply processing data. Catherine had made a choice. She had chosen public humiliation as her tactic, had weaponized Tyler against me, had issued an ultimatum in front of witnesses whose opinions carried weight in professional circles. She had done it with complete confidence, protected by the narrative she'd constructed over months. The devoted wife trying to hold a blended family together, the struggling stepson seeking guidance, the distant husband who prioritized work over relationships. It was a clean story, easily understood, and it had the advantage of confirming what many civilians already believed about military marriages, that they were inherently difficult, isolating, often doomed. What Catherine didn't understand was that I had already calculated this scenario weeks ago. I had identified variables, prepared contingencies, war-gamed outcomes. Tonight hadn't surprised me. It had simply confirmed what I'd already known. I started the engine and drove back to base, following the familiar route past shipyards and piers where vessels sat dark against the water. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I simply drove, thinking through the next 72 hours with the same methodical precision I brought to any operation. Catherine had declared war. She just didn't know she'd already lost. Catherine called me 19 times the following day. I didn't answer. She sent text messages that cycled through predictable patterns: anger, confusion, bargaining. Tyler sent one message: "She deserves way better than you. Don't even think about coming back." I deleted it without responding and blocked his number. By Monday morning, she had begun her public campaign. She called the base main number asking to speak with my supervisor. The operator routed her through 3 different offices before politely informing her that personnel matters required official channels. She tried again Tuesday, this time claiming a family emergency. The duty officer who took the call verified there was no actual emergency, logged the interaction, and filed it according to protocol. Wednesday afternoon, she appeared at the main gate. The Marine sentry checked her dependent ID, asked the purpose of her visit, and called the Provost Marshal's office when she demanded immediate access to see me. They contacted my office. My aide informed her I was unavailable and suggested she call to schedule an appointment through proper channels. She asked when I would be available. He provided the main switchboard number. Over the next 4 days, she called that number 23 times. Every call was logged in the system. On Friday, she sent an email to what she believed was my personal address, but was actually an official military account monitored by my administrative staff. The email accused me of abandonment, of hiding behind military bureaucracy, of emotional cruelty. She carbon copied her sister, her mother, and 2 close friends, apparently believing this would create social pressure. What she didn't realize was that every email sent to a military address became part of an official record. Every phone call was documented. Every gate interaction was logged with timestamp and details. She was methodically building a paper trail of evidence and had no idea she was doing it. During this period, I maintained my routine without any deviation. Wake at 05:30, complete a 45-minute workout in the base gym, shower, dress in working uniform, arrive at my office by 0700, review intelligence briefings, attend morning planning sessions, meet with subordinate commanders, coordinate with staff on upcoming operations, lunch in the officer's mess, no personal conversations, return to work until 1800 hours, back to temporary quarters, prepare a simple meal, review reports and correspondence, in bed by 2200. Nobody asked me about Catherine. The officers who had witnessed the scene at the gala understood that discretion was part of the professional culture. You didn't probe into a senior colleague's personal life without invitation. But I knew they were watching, waiting to see if I would falter, if the public humiliation would affect my performance, if I would display weakness or compromise judgment. I gave them nothing to observe except continued competence. Meanwhile, Catherine had expanded her campaign to social media. She posted carefully worded messages about the loneliness of being a military spouse, about feeling isolated and unsupported, about the sacrifices required when your partner prioritizes duty over family. She never mentioned my name directly, but anyone who knew us would understand the context. Tyler amplified every post, adding his own commentary about stepfathers who refuse to step up, about men who hide behind their jobs instead of being emotionally present. The narrative they were constructing was compelling in its simplicity. Catherine was the devoted wife fighting to keep a family intact. Tyler was the young man seeking guidance and acceptance. I was the cold, emotionally distant officer who valued professional obligation over human connection. The story was clean, digestible, and had the built-in advantage of confirming existing stereotypes about military marriages. Their narrative had one fundamental flaw. It was constructed entirely on assumptions. They assumed I was powerless to respond effectively. They assumed my silence indicated weakness or shame. They assumed that because I hadn't defended myself publicly, I had no viable defense. They assumed the uniform I wore represented nothing more than employment, not an identity embedded within a hierarchical structure of authority they fundamentally didn't understand. On day 9, I moved out of the house. I had already arranged temporary quarters on base 3 weeks earlier, submitted the request through official channels, received approval within 48 hours, a timeline that should have told Catherine something. but she had never asked about the paperwork she'd seen me reviewing. I packed methodically. 2 uniforms, 1 set of civilian clothes, toiletries, laptop, a single framed photograph of my parents that had sat on my nightstand. I left everything else. The furniture Catherine had selected, the artwork she'd insisted we needed, the expensive kitchen equipment she'd purchased and never learned to use. I locked the front door behind me at 08:30, placed my house key on the kitchen counter beside a handwritten note that read, "Divorce papers will be delivered by my attorney within 7 days." By 0900, I was settled in my new quarters. By 0915, I'd called my attorney, a retired Navy captain who specialized in military family law, and instructed him to prepare comprehensive dissolution documents. He asked if I was certain about the timing. I told him I'd been certain for 3 months. He said everything would be ready by the end of the week. Catherine tried the main gate again that same afternoon. The sentry on duty called my office per protocol. I instructed him to inform Mrs. Harrison that I was unavailable for visitors. She demanded to know when I would be available. He suggested she contact my attorney for any further communication. She asked for the attorney's name and contact information. He informed her he was not authorized to provide that information. That evening I sat in my quarters looking out at the harbor, watching ships at anchor, their running lights reflected on dark water. I thought about Catherine's ultimatum at the gala, about the confidence she'd displayed when delivering it, about her fundamental assumption that I would either capitulate to her demands or be publicly revealed as the villain she'd already decided I was. She had made a critical tactical error. She had assumed that because I chose not to respond, I had nothing to respond with. In exactly 8 days, at a scheduled event she would almost certainly attend, she would learn the truth, not through words or explanations or arguments, but through simple, undeniable revelation. The divorce documents were delivered to Catherine's residence on a Monday morning via certified courier requiring signature. I had reviewed them the previous evening. Comprehensive, precise, every asset properly documented, every communication logged and referenced. My attorney didn't editorialize or speculate. He simply compiled the facts: date of marriage, current residential status, property division according to prenuptial agreement, complete record of Catherine's attempts to access military facilities, her public statements at the gala, her social media activity, Tyler's continued occupancy of the marital residence despite having no legal dependent status. Catherine called my attorney within 40 minutes of signing for the package. He briefed me later that afternoon on the conversation. She had been shocked, he reported. She had apparently believed I would come to my senses, that there would be negotiation, that this was some kind of pressure tactic. She asked if I would agree to meet with her in person. He informed her no. She asked if I would reconsider the filing. He stated that the dissolution was final and non-negotiable. She asked what she was supposed to do now. He suggested she retain her own legal counsel immediately. Tyler's social media went silent for exactly 48 hours after the documents were served. Then he posted a lengthy message about toxic masculinity, about men who cannot handle being challenged, about the critical importance of standing up to authority figures who demand respect without earning it. He shared multiple articles about military divorce statistics and patterns of emotional abuse in hierarchical relationships. His posts received dozens of likes and supportive comments. Catherine added affirming messages beneath each one, thanking him for his courage in speaking truth. They were constructing their public defense in real time, shaping the narrative before it could be effectively challenged by facts. The problem was that their narrative existed in complete disconnection from objective reality, and objective reality has a weight that eventually crushes fiction, regardless of how many people choose to believe it. I spent those weeks preparing for a scheduled inspection with the same meticulous attention to detail I brought to every significant operation. The event would involve facility tours, comprehensive readiness assessments, and a formal reception in the main conference hall. Senior leadership would be present. Every space would be evaluated. Every protocol would be observed. Every detail mattered. I coordinated daily with department heads, held systematic planning sessions, personally walked through each space that would be part of the official tour. I reviewed presentation materials, verified equipment status, ensured personnel understood their specific roles and responsibilities. I confirmed the reception program, attendance list, seating arrangements, speaking order, timeline, and I selected my uniform for the reception portion of the event. Not working khakis, not service dress blues, but dress whites. Formal attire appropriate for ceremonial occasions. I tried it on in my quarters the night before the inspection, checking fit and alignment, ensuring every detail met regulation standards. Catherine's name appeared on the reception attendance list 4 days before the scheduled date. She had confirmed through the automated RSVP system, likely believing it was her prerogative as a military spouse, possibly intending to force another public confrontation, perhaps hoping to pressure me into a conversation I had been systematically avoiding. Her motivation didn't matter. Her attendance was noted and factored into planning. Tyler would almost certainly accompany her. He had been emboldened by what he interpreted as my retreat, my silence, my apparent inability to respond to their public campaign. He would view the reception as another opportunity to demonstrate his moral superiority, to show the community that he had successfully stood up to me. I completed my final review of inspection materials that evening, filed the last required reports, confirmed the schedule one final time with my staff. Every variable had been identified and addressed. Every contingency had been planned for. Tomorrow would proceed according to established protocol, regardless of what Catherine or Tyler believed would happen. I set my alarm for 0500 and went to bed. The next day would clarify everything, not through explanation or argument or emotional appeal, but through simple revelation of facts that had always existed, but had never been relevant to discuss. Sometimes truth doesn't require defense or justification. It simply requires appropriate context to become undeniable. The inspection began at 0900 hours with formal arrivals and initial briefings. Senior leadership came on schedule. I met them at the designated entrance along with the base commander. We exchanged proper salutes and proceeded directly to the main briefing room. The presentations went exactly as rehearsed. Department heads delivered their readiness assessments with precision, answered questions with detailed knowledge, demonstrated the kind of sharp professionalism expected at this level of evaluation. By 1100 hours, the formal inspection portion had concluded, and we transitioned to the conference hall for the reception. The hall was already filling when our party arrived. Officers in dress uniforms standing in small conversational groups, civilian employees and contractors in business attire, spouses in formal wear appropriate for a midday event. I took position near the main entrance, observing arrivals, acknowledging greetings with brief nods. Officers passing nearby came to attention and rendered salutes, which I returned. Civilians who recognized me nodded respectfully. I maintained my position with hands clasped loosely behind my back, posture relaxed but correct. Catherine entered at 11:18 hours. She wore a conservative navy dress, her hair styled simply, expression composed but carrying visible tension. Tyler walked beside her wearing khaki slacks and a blazer that fit poorly across the shoulders, his face already showing the boredom of someone required to attend an event he considered beneath his interest. They accepted champagne flutes from a passing server and began scanning the room methodically. Catherine's eyes found me first. I watched her gaze move from my face to the uniform, registering that this was more formal than anything she had previously seen me wear. Confusion crossing her features about what that might signify. Uncertainty about whether to approach or maintain distance. Tyler noticed me a moment later. His expression shifted from boredom to something that might have been recognition, though I doubted he understood what he was actually observing. They began moving through the crowd in my general direction, not directly, but gradually, the way people do when they want to approach someone without making their intention obvious to others. They had closed to approximately 10 feet when Vice Admiral Kenneth Morrison stepped to the center of the hall and raised his voice to address the assembled guests. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the reception, I want to personally acknowledge the outstanding work of our host today, Vice Admiral David Harrison. The hall went completely silent. Morrison continued speaking, but I stopped tracking his specific words. I was watching Catherine's face, watching the champagne glass freeze halfway to her lips. watching her eyes go wide as the title registered, as the meaning penetrated, as the implications began cascading through her understanding. Tyler stood beside her with his mouth slightly open, the smugness draining from his expression like water through a broken dam. Around them, every officer in the immediate area had come to attention. Hands moved in practiced synchronization, rendering salutes that I returned with automatic precision. The civilians remained motionless, uncertain of exact protocol but understanding they were witnessing something significant, something that had just fundamentally altered the context of everything they thought they knew. Morrison finished his remarks and turned toward me, extending his hand. I shook it. "Excellent briefing, David," he said. "Your staff performed exceptionally." "Thank you, sir," I replied. He glanced past me, noticed Catherine standing frozen 8 feet away, and his expression shifted to polite but formal acknowledgement. "Mrs. Harrison," a single nod, courteous but carrying no particular warmth. Then back to me. "Shall we continue the facility tour?" "Of course, sir." I followed him toward the far side of the hall where other senior officers had gathered near the windows overlooking the harbor. Behind me, I heard Catherine say my name, David, her voice tight and small and nothing like the theatrical projection she'd used at the gala. I didn't turn around. I didn't acknowledge the sound. I simply walked away, maintaining my measured pace, my posture unchanged. The reception continued for another hour and 40 minutes. I moved through standard professional conversations, discussed operational readiness challenges, accepted congratulations on the inspection outcome from various attendees. Catherine attempted to approach me 2 more times. The first attempt, the base commander intercepted her with polite conversation about nothing of substance that nonetheless prevented her forward movement. The second attempt, my aide materialized at her elbow and quietly suggested that any formal meetings would need to be scheduled through proper channels. She and Tyler left before the reception officially concluded, moving quickly toward the exit, both of their faces showing expressions I didn't bother to study. That evening I found 3 new voicemail messages from Catherine on my phone. I deleted all 3 without listening. There were also 2 emails waiting in my inbox, both from her personal account. I forwarded them to my attorney without opening them. The following morning, my aide informed me she had called the office 17 times overnight and throughout the early morning. I instructed him to stop accepting her calls entirely and to refer any future contact attempts to my attorney's office. The revelation had been made. The power dynamic had reversed completely. And there was absolutely nothing left that required saying. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday 11 weeks after the reception. The decree arrived in my office mid-morning. I reviewed it briefly. Straightforward division of assets according to prenuptial agreement. Catherine receiving what law and prior contract required, nothing more. The house had been mine before the marriage. Finances had remained largely separate throughout. There were no complications. Tyler moved out within 72 hours of the reception. I learned this through informal channels. Apparently relocated to Pennsylvania, living with his biological father, found work in a warehouse on evening shift. I didn't verify the information. It had no bearing on anything that mattered. Catherine made one final attempt at contact 8 weeks after the decree was signed. A handwritten letter, delivered by courier to my office. 4 pages of apologies and explanations and requests for another chance. She wrote that she had made a terrible mistake. She wrote that she had never understood what my career actually meant. She wrote that she wanted to talk, to explain, to try again. I read the letter once, placed it in my desk drawer, and never responded. The gala incident circulated through the community for months as one of those cautionary stories that spread without official discussion. The spouse who didn't understand protocol, the public confrontation that backfired completely, the reminder that discretion and respect exist for legitimate reasons. I never addressed it directly, never offered my version of events, never sought any form of vindication. The facts had made themselves clear without requiring my participation. 6 months later, I stood on a pier at dawn watching a carrier prepare for deployment. The crew moved through departure procedures with practiced efficiency, their movements precise and coordinated. Behind me, the harbor stretched toward the horizon, gray water merging with gray sky at a distance I couldn't clearly measure. I thought briefly about Catherine's letter, still sitting untouched in my desk drawer. About Tyler's deleted social media posts, erased as though they had never existed. About that moment at the reception when the title had been spoken aloud and everything had shifted. When all the assumptions they had built their confidence on had collapsed under the simple weight of truth they had never bothered to investigate. Some people construct their entire understanding of the world based on what they want to believe, rather than what actually is. Catherine had wanted to believe I was powerless, replaceable, someone who could be humiliated publicly without meaningful consequence. Tyler had wanted to believe his disrespect was justified because I had somehow failed to meet standards I had never agreed to or acknowledged. They had both been wrong, and by the time they understood how wrong, the knowledge carried no useful value. The carrier's horn sounded across the water, deep and resonant. I turned away from the pier and walked back toward my car, the morning air cold against my face. Some decisions cannot be undone.